Good morning, colleagues. Welcome to yet another series, another in the series of Our Humanist TV, where we do share and empower consumers in your respective locations, but using Uganda as a case. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to our Friday series on Humanist TV Africa. As usual, I would like to thank our colleagues at Humanist Media Africa for providing us the opportunity to empower consumers to have a better quality life and sustainable lifestyles using our consumer protection and better business agenda programs that we have at Consent. Yeah, Consent in partnership with Humanist Media Africa. We always have the Humanist TV Africa series on consumer empowerment, better business, and we bring in many other aspects. So today we are greatly honored to come in and have yet another of those series. One, I would like to thank our host, Kato Paul Mokasa. I would like to thank our producer with your fellow producers, Dennis Bongole, who puts together the whole show, spends tireless nights planning. Would like to thank you for all this. Then also to thank our viewers, our listeners who follow us, who go in and review and who use whatever we share as material. I would like also to thank all my colleagues. Top of the chart is Mr. Bernard Wambale, Carlos, whom I call BBC, and I would like to thank all others who usually join us in all this. We have Professor Achileo Kaya, we have Agnes, Miss Agnes Chirabo of Food Rights Alliance, Professor Makerere, and many other partners. You do not just make the TV program strong, you make it valuable and you make it priceless for everybody because we meet many people. They tell us that they go back and enjoy the series. So the management of Humanist TV Africa, thank you very much. All the teams that work there. And I would like to thank my heads of program, Bernard, for steering us, and all the other colleagues we work with in the background, those that are in research and knowledge management, those are in communication and engagement. Because you bring in the series, you bring in the information, you manage the information, the knowledge we generate, and all others that are with consent at our consumer advice points are in Mbale, in Gulu, Fort Portal, Kasese, Kampala, and Wakiso. All these teams enable us to come in and bring in whatever we hold dear. Or what we hold dear is nurturing a quality culture, advocating for consumer protection, effective consumer protection, and better businesses. When we harvest the complaints, we analyze them and use them to advocate for improving business delivery, service delivery, business development, and improving our economies. Like we always say, we use Uganda as a case, but wherever you are in the global world, use some of the views we table to see to it that you impact positively the society you live in as a consumer, as a business, as a duty bearer. We have got one planet, and this planet, we have to hold it dear. Our responsible consumption should enable us to advocate for responsible production. Once we get responsible production, then we need to have responsible consumption, because with irresponsible consumption, this can also lead to irresponsible production. Irresponsible production also leads to irresponsible consumption. So, as consumers, the biggest socioeconomic grouping that drives economies, that also plays a role in bringing about policies, because when we advocate, when we drive the market, when we drive decisions, we can change and have positive and sustainable approaches. So all that said today, ladies and gentlemen, we have gone through this series. We have entered another month of April. The month of April has a lot of things to do. With my colleagues, we have zeroed to continue the discussion on sustainability, sustainable lifestyles. And one of the aspects that bring in unsustainable lifestyles is waste. Just a few weekdays ago, globally, we have been looking at the Zero Waste campaign. Now, we would like also to continuously add the campaign, so that, as we said in the month of March, issues to do with sustainable lifestyles is going to be an issue we are going to roll with. So, looking at different frameworks, looking at different approaches, today we are adding a building block on harnessing a sustainable future, a framework for lifestyle transformation. And the aspect that we are looking in, adopting zero waste through 5 hours. What are these 5 hours? These are issues we are going to expound. But the 5 hours have got a lot of aspects to do with issues to bring in the approach of responsible consumption, which responsible consumption leads to sustainable lives in our homes, in places of work, even in society. How can we influence to reduce on waste, to refuse to generate waste through responsible consumption, through responsible actions? How can we look at the waste that we have and reuse it? How can we like people who are redesigning their old clothes into other designs, you're reusing them, you're redesigning aspects the way they are doing, even redesigning their homes where they are consuming a lot of energy, they redesign them to consume less. We need to do that to our economies. We need to do it to our businesses. So the other area is all about recycling. In one way or another, we are recycling many other aspects. And all these bring us to look at issues from a social perspective, from an environmental perspective, an economic perspective, even politically, legal. And we need to look at, are we ethical in all that we're doing? So zero waste has got ethics in it. So, ladies and gentlemen, bringing you and bringing a mixed grill of different issues that we would love to look at as we roll in the month of April as a consumer advocacy and a better business organization. We would love to center around the Sustainable Goal 12. Responsible consumption and responsible production. So we are going to spend the next 4 weeks revolving around that. And as I do the curtain rising, as I will be bringing in Bernard later after the curtain rising, picked up many aspects which I feel we need to have foresights in to discuss and see how best do we add to your mindset, up your mindset redesigning. Now, let me use the 5 R's, where we need to redesign our mindsets, to rethink how we do things, to refocus. Okay? So this is where I learned something a few weeks ago from another consumer uh, advocate. We were in a meeting and says, perfection killed good. Whenever we want to try our level best to be perfect, most of the times, by the time we are pretending to be perfect, good has already been killed. But we need to have good consumption behavior. We need to have good business practices. The perfection will come as we practice, as we work. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we are going in harnessing issues to do with our lives, looking at frameworks for lifestyles that we need to transform, I also need to pick up from somebody who wrote something very, very interesting. And he said, when we create an environment, whether it is our bodies, minds, or surroundings, we set ourselves up for optimum growth and well-being. In the context of plants, healthy soils, adequate nutrients, and proper care can help them thrive. Those are plants, but we can also bring it to us human beings. If we look at healthy air, we look at healthy foods, we look at healthy transport, healthy energy, healthy finance, okay? There is a lot we can do. Similarly, when we optimize our physical and mental health, we become more resilient, we become more productive, and better equipped to handle life's challenges. And when we look at what we are looking at, the framework for lifestyle transformation, that statement works well. And we are going to spend a lot of time this month revolving around that to enable us to be resilient, productive, better equipped to deal with lifestyle challenges. So he further says this mindset can apply to various areas of life, including personal growth, nurturing a healthy mindset, emotions, and relationships can help us grow as individuals. So as we are looking at zero waste, we need to look at how we nurture healthy mindsets with the 5 R's. We can change around the way. Business and career. Fostering on a healthy work environment with a positive company culture can lead to growth and success. Just look at all the working environment. Let it be the government, let it be local government, let them be businesses, civil society. Our homes are business. So if we are fostering a healthy work environment, we have a quality culture, we can see how we grow. Then with the communities, building healthy, inclusive, and supportive communities can help us thrive and grow. It concludes, remember, a healthy foundation is essential for growth, development, and success in all aspects of life. So as we are adopting zero waste, we need to live in circularity. When we impede effectiveness in one angle, it has a ripple effect in other aspects. Which other aspects are going to impact us? And this is when I shared with you, colleagues, we are going to revolve around as we are harnessing the sustainable future, we need to look at frameworks that are going to transform our lifestyles. Like I've said, we're going to focus a lot on responsible consumption and responsible business, which are in line of our programs, the consumer protection and better business programs or agendas, where we are laying our foundation on a nurturing equality culture. So very quickly, as I wind up to bring in Bernard, I would like us also to look where we are looking at responsible consumption and production patterns. I need to remind ourselves with the SDG 12 aspirations. The observations are, if we are to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns, we need to note that our planet has got abundance or abundant natural resources that we can use. We can be part of the natural resource, but we are utilizing them not responsibly. Our current behavior, consumption patterns, way beyond. So that's we need to rethink as we look at the other 5 R's. We need to rethink. We need and we must learn to be sustainable. How do we use those resources in a sustainable way? We must learn how to produce in a sustainable way that will reverse the harm that we have inflicted on the planet. And this brings us many targets. And this is why we are adopting the zero waste discussion this month of April, so that we have good consumption, we have good production. We will be looking at many targets that are there with regards to responsible consumption and production, and make sure that we roll well. There are many targets, but in our discussion today and in the coming, we can focus on a number of aspects. If I look at one of the targets, which is 12.3, to reduce to half the per capita of food waste. This is something that we need to do as consumers. How do we look at food? Why do we waste it? We'll be expounding all these in our coming series. The other one, and which Bernard is thriving in many aspects to look at in his awareness and speeches and talks. Target 12.4, responsible management of chemicals and waste. You'll find that there's a lot of chemical misuse going into our bodies, our environment, bringing in the water sources, irrespective of them being in environment, our communities. Everybody is taking on the responsibility to be a chemical or pesticide dispenser. Where is the responsible use? Where many consumers who do not directly engage in dispensing the chemicals, whether selling them, whether on farms, in the market, we are victims. The other aspects that we will need is to reduce waste generation. And this is where the 5 R's are coming in. So as consumers, being 7 billion plus and looking at the African continent, the continent that is endowed with natural resources, the continent that has got the fastest growing population, we need to have the big numbers that are sustainable, big numbers that are living responsibly, the big numbers that are doing responsible production. Having said all that, colleagues, once again, I welcome you to this series. The series that are leading in aspects of foresight, aspects of action, aspects that require us to change our mind, change our social behavior, approaches of life, and be responsible consumers. So thank you for listening in to me. It's been a long curtain riser that has touched a number of things. And I would like to welcome Bennett to link the discussion to our daily lives, bringing in our consumer responsibility, consumer rights, and how we can advocate, how we can collaborate, and how we can sustain whatever we are doing positively. Thank you very much. And Bennett, you're most welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Henry, once again for. You call it curtain riser. You always call it a curtain riser. I'm still thinking about that word. I'm yet to get the answer what it actually is. But giving us usually preamble is very important and helps us to set a pace of what exactly we're going to talk about. I really want to congratulate our colleagues for the new math. Of course, last month we had a lot of discussions and only to realize the math ended. So we are now in the new math. We want to really thank God for bringing us to this new math. And of course, as usual, we are committed to ensuring that we have discussions around critical issues that affect humanity, that affect consumers. Of course, today we are looking at harnessing a sustainable future, looking at the frameworks for lifestyles transformation. And our major focus is around waste, and it's more or less around zero waste. Now, as usual, I always want to remind our people about particular issues that we have always discussed. Last time I reminded you of sustainable lifestyles. Every time you're talking about this subject matter, it's very important to keep referring to what we are actually looking at, sustainable lifestyles. And we mentioned that sustainable lifestyles, we are looking at it basically in three perspectives. We are looking at sustainable lifestyles from the economic perspective. So we are saying that what is it that you're doing wherever you are, and how is that action affecting your economy, you as a person, as an individual, but also how is it affecting the economy of the communities, the countries where we're coming from. So every time you do an activity, every time you do something, you need to reflect on the economic sense of it. How economical is it to me, to my household, to the countries, to the government, and to everybody around? That is one angle, the economic perspective. So if you do something and that something leads to disease, how much money are you going to spend to treat that disease? Or how much money is your neighbor going to use to actually treat themselves because of your action? So the example that I gave, or I keep giving, is the use of highly hazardous pesticides. Every time you're spraying a highly hazardous pesticide and you're naked, you don't have protective gear. When this chemical enters into your skin, your nose, your mouth, your eyes, etc., and it causes maybe, let us say, organ failure, how much money are you going to spend to treat your organ failure versus the cost of money that you used in the spraying process? So if you reasoned it that way, it would mean that every time you're reflecting on how much you're going to spend on an activity, then you need to think about it from the money perspective. If you start consuming a lot of fat, a lot of sugar, a lot of salt, and you're not careful, and you got a disease because of your lifestyle of binge eating or eating junk, how much money are you going to spend in treating the resulting non-communicable disease? If you got diabetes, how many days are you going to spend off the work because you are treating yourself of diabetes? If you got a cancer because of the reckless activity maybe that you've done or maybe your neighbor has done, how much money are you going to spend in treating that cancer? If you got hypertension, how much money are you going to use to treat hypertension, aware that most of the non-communicable diseases may not even cure? So it's a life kind of suffering. So if you converted that suffering into economic sense, into the money that you're going to spend, then you would rather reverse your action and you start having sustainable lifestyle. Now, number two is to look at it from the social perspective. How am I becoming a social misfit because of the action that I'm actually undertaking? What is the impact of the activity that I'm actually doing to the society or to the people that live around me? For instance, if you are one person who generates a lot of waste and then you wait for a rainy season to come and then you go and dump that waste in a trench of water on a drainage system, and then the drainage system is clogged with your waste and then flooding happens, how much social concern are you causing to the population? So you need to look at it from the perspective of sociality. So the social dynamic, how is my waste or how is my activity affecting the population or the people around me? I can be a cause of death to many people. Just imagine the case for Chitezi. The waste we were generating, at the end of the day, it became a menace and caused death, leaving people orphans, leaving people widows, leaving people lifeless. So in a perspective such as that, the question would be, how is the social perspective of the lifestyles that we are actually living? Becomes a question of concern. So every time you're discussing this perspective, think about it socially. Let me take it back again to the overeating. You're eating a lot of junk, a lot of fat, a lot of whatever, and you become huge, 200 kilograms, 150. Do you realize that you can be socially affected, that you don't want to be seen by other people? When you pass around the community and everyone is looking at you, you start having mental kind of, some bit of psychological torture. And so you end up closing yourself in your house because you don't want to be seen by young children or adults who keep mocking you because of your weight. Social. So when you're talking about the lifestyles, you need to keep remembering that. How is this socially affecting myself and the people around me? Can I move freely? Can I have that freedom to associate with others? If you got disease because of the practices and the wrongdoings we do out there, and then you are no longer able to go to church, you are not able to go to a community meeting, you are not able to go for, happenings or outings, it is affecting you socially and so emotionally. So when you are talking about harnessing a sustainable future, the question would be, are you doing sustainable practices that can actually lead you to a sustainable future? Or you are doing practices that are actually hindering you from even seeing the future? Many are the times when we do things that are actually hindering us from even seeing the future. I am going to, in a few minutes, I'm going to display a small video so that it helps us to reflect on what I'm just talking about. And then maybe lastly is about the issue of environment. Remember, those are the three dimensions of sustainability: social, economic, and environmental. What is the impact of your lifestyle or the activity you're undertaking to the environment? Is it polluting the environment? If the environment is polluted, how do you expect to use it tomorrow? Many are the times when people do activities and then we contaminate the air and we forget that we are actually beneficiaries of that air. We are the same people breathing in that air. So when we start failing to breathe, then how do you start talking about the future? It means you will just die and you forget the future. But what has caused that? Why aren't you moving into the future? Because you brought a poisonous chemical compound and released it in space, and many people suffered. If it isn't that, by the way, you and I eat a lot of meat, a lot of fish, a lot of, but then we are the same people pouring effluent into the water bodies where the fish stays. Now the fish gets contaminated. When the fish gets contaminated, you are the one buying it to eat it. So how do you expect the future when you're already eating poisonous fish? There is a video that we have always discussed with Henry, where people started putting waste into the water bodies and the marine life wasn't surviving. And actually fish produces contaminated finger rings, whatever, and then you take them into your pond. When you take it into your pond and you think you're doing business, but all of them keep dying. Why are they dying? Because you contaminated the water. So what is the practice that you're actually doing that is contaminating the environment in which life survives? So when we reflect widely about harnessing a sustainable future, we should always first focus on harnessing what you can actually harness. The economy, the environment, and the sociology. The moment you harness those ones, then it can lead you to harnessing the future. Now the question is, how is my lifestyle affecting sustainable future? Is the lifestyle I'm living leading me and my children and the children of my children to the future, or we are just playing games? So let me quickly share a video clip here, which should help us to appreciate what we are just talking about. Henry, you'll confirm if you're able to view my screen and you're able to see.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so I just want us to observe that gentleman who is carrying waste from his household or wherever he's coming from, and he's utilizing the rain to actually pour it in a drainage system. So this is a drainage system that somebody is pouring waste, so that the water can actually take the waste. Now the question is, where is this water ending? So where the water is ending, probably it is going to the water, to the river or to the lake, and that's where the waste is actually also going. If that is not the case, the waste can even clog the drainage channel, and then the channel gets blocked and all that waste water floods. And when it floods, where does it go? In our households, in our houses, in our kitchens, and so if you are driving, you are stuck for 10 hours waiting for the water to relapse. If you are lucky and has not gone to your house anyway. But if it has gone to your house, you may lose all the property. So where is the sustainability of such an action? It is something to reflect on. So that is something that maybe we could use to reflect on what I've just been talking about. So as you're disposing waste in the water channel, it is getting blocked. The water is flooding back into your household and your children get sick, and then you go and treat them. So you see that there's a lot of unsustainable practices that actually happen in our communities. So that video just helps us to bring the perspective of sustainable actions. And it's actually even common that we see people getting human waste, especially in the night where people don't have any latrines and they use polythene and whatever, and then in the morning they go and discard it in a runway, and ends up in a market where your food is being sold and cholera comes up. So all of those practices have to be thought about. So having given that kind of preamble, I need now also to look at now issues of zero waste. And I want to use food as a narrative that we can use. One question I've been asking myself: why do we have waste? We have waste many times because of consumerism. Consumerism is the perspective where people just buy things because they think they can buy them. For instance, there are some of you or some of us who have wardrobes with clothes, with shoes, with whatever, and we have never used them for the last 1 year. So you have clothing or you have fabric that you have never used for the last 1 year. It means that literally you don't need it. So what happens is that people go and buy cheap things, and maybe you buy a cloth and it just gets a crack a little bit, and then someone throws it away. The question is, where are you throwing it? You're not using it, you've thrown it, and you've thrown it to the environment. Now, every time you throw it to the environment, It simply means that that cloth may find itself in a landfill. When it finds itself in the landfill, it means that it may contribute to the waste there, which recently killed people. If it doesn't find itself in the landfill, it will find itself in the water body because you've disposed it off, and so it goes with the wastewater and finds itself in Lake Victoria. Now that's why you will see many at the times when our water bodies are actually full of waste. But where is the waste coming from? The waste is coming from your home, the waste is coming from your car, the waste is coming from your society. And unfortunately, it goes to the water source where all of you are actually picking water for use. Now, just imagine if you have old clothing, you have old shoes, and they have all been dumped in a water source. It means that the fish that you proudly eat is being suffocated, and sometimes the fish can actually die because of the waste. Now for you, you are busy in your market and someone is bringing for you fish that just died of suffocation because of too much waste. Now that fish is certainly contaminated, and that's what you're going to feed on. So you see that your action is leading to the death of fish, and that fish is coming back to be your food. And when it comes back to be your food, the mere fact that it was contaminated, you are eating contaminated food, and so you have a risk of foodborne illness. So what is causing this foodborne illness is not necessarily the contamination by the monger. It is just the contamination that you caused yourself. So when you're looking at issues of zero waste, then you start thinking about how do I procure items of high quality that I can use over the years and I can reuse it over and over again. It is the same to plastics. I want to, of course, appreciate the hotels in Kampala and elsewhere that have resorted from using plastic bottles of water to glass, because they know they can serve water in this glass and they wash it again, they put more water in the afternoon and something like that. Now, in our households, what materials are we using? Are they reusable? Can we recycle them? You know, those are the principles that Henry was talking about, the 5 R's. If it were possible, we need to reduce on things that we purchase. For instance, if I go to a supermarket and I buy items worth 200,000 Uganda shillings, or maybe let us say $100. Now, you find that supermarkets keep packing each item in a polythene bag. And then you see someone carrying 10 polythene bags, but what he's carrying can actually be carried in one packaging material. So the issue of reduce is about minimizing usage of wrong things. If we can minimize, for instance, the use of polythene bags, it is even better that way. Why must I carry 10 polythene bags to my house? Where am I going to put them? It means that the moment you remove the items that you just procured, all of those polythene bags, you're basically going to take them into your waste bin, and when they come from the waste bin, they find themselves in a landfill or somewhere else. And at the end of the day, they actually destroy the soil, the microorganisms in the soil, generate methane, which is an ozone, a poor gas to the ozone. And at the end of the day, we see temperatures rising, or unrealistic rainfalls, etc. But where is that coming from? Because you just didn't reduce the consumption or the usage of polythene. As simple as that. So you see that every time you're talking about zero waste, we need to think about how do we reduce the usage of particular materials. So if, for instance, as Henry projects that, if you look at the affluent that is in Lake Victoria, just like you can see in that photograph, it makes you start thinking, who is contributing to this waste? Where is this waste coming from? The waste is basically coming from our homes, our households. Why is this waste? Because we didn't want to minimize the usage of particular things. And of course, it goes also with policy, of course. If we don't have policy regulations on certain things, then you'll find them actually as a menace to communities, to society, to environment, and etc. So when you look at, just imagine that water source we are looking at on the screen. how safe is this water to human beings? Because this water will come back to us for drinking, for household chores and irrigation. How safe is it to the animals that stay in the water? How safe is it to the domestic animals that keep drinking this water? So are we sustainable? Are we talking about sustainability? So you realize that every time we minimize waste, we actually reduce the risk of pollution to the environment, to our homes, to our water, to etc., even to the air that we breathe. So you can imagine the quality of the air we breathe if we are not sensitive of what we are pushing out. So the guidance is that as we are talking about zero waste, first think about minimal purchase of things that can actually cause trouble to the environment or to the health of people. So that is how you start thinking about it. Let us maybe look at people who have children. We all know that currently our children have grown in such a way that we don't want to give them reusable materials. So for instance, a pamper, people who are using pampers, it is a single use. Now, in a day, a child is using 4 pampers. So where are you going to discard those pampers? It's very unfortunate that most of the young mothers keep telling me that pampers can never be discarded in a latrine because most of your households are using toilets. Now you cannot put a pamper in a toilet to flush. So meaning that all the pampers of the day will be collected, put together. So imagine if each day you are using 5 pampers. It means that in 7 days you are using 35 pampers. And that means if you multiplied that by a month, just imagine 30 in a month what you are using, and then you multiply it by a month. So it means that in a month you're talking about over hundreds of pampers that you're actually using. Now, where do they end? You're not putting them in a latrine, you're not putting them in a toilet. Where do they go at the end of the day? So they end up in landfills, and when they're in landfills, remember these pampers are carrying human waste. So if they are carrying human waste and they're in a landfill and it rains, it means that you're contributing to the contamination of water by the fecal matter. So these are the reflections we need to think about. So every time you're talking about lifestyle transformation, we need to transform the purchasing of items that we don't actually need in our households. Minimize them as much as possible. Plastics, polythene, pampers, etc. Something that is going to cause trouble to the environment has to be minimized as much as possible. Now, there are also another area that contributes to the lifestyle transformation. It is the issue of refuse. You should be able to refuse certain things. So for instance, why don't you reject non-essential items? If you go to the supermarket and then you're going to buy a tin of milk, tinned milk, or you're going to buy milk that is already pasteurized milk, for instance. This milk is already packed in a polythene. Why would you then also allow again the person selling you to pack for you again in a polythene? What about if I'm buying pasteurized milk or maybe bottled milk? The milk is already in a bottle. Why don't I just carry that bottle and put it in my car other than packing it again in a Kavera, which is going to cause trouble? So we should be able to reject certain things that we can do without. Basically, that's what I'm saying. Do I have the potential as a consumer to reject something because I don't actually need it? Because it may contribute to a pollution. Because it may contribute to environmental hazards. So we should be in position to actually reject other things that we don't actually need. That is the era of refuse. We should be able to refuse particular things. So for instance, why should you buy a cheap cloth even when you have the money, but you want to just buy a cheap thing which you're going to use for 1 month and you discard? Why don't you purchase something that is substantially expensive but long term? You can use it for a long time. Just imagine having a shirt that you bought in 2010 and you're still wearing it. Now, because of the lifestyles we are living, you want people to see that you have many clothings. We end up discarding even clothes that we still need. Now, if you don't need it, Give it as charity to other people who don't need it so that they are able to wear it other than discarding it away. So that is why now you see that when we had, for instance, the Christians are having Lenten season, the Muslims just finished their fasting, they are promoting almsgiving, that whatever you're not using but someone else can use it, give it out so that someone can use it. It is better than getting those items and discarding them away. So we need to learn to refuse to use what we can do without. If you can do without a polythene, don't buy it. If you can do without a plastic, don't buy it. If you can do without certain things, reject them so that you stay in an environment that is actually conducive. When I was still studying in the seminary, there was a saying that cleanliness is closer to godliness. And so littering in a seminary was criminal. That when you litter, actually you're supposed to be suspended because you are not respecting the nature. That was the saying in that place. So I now understand it when I'm talking about the zero waste. That even when we're going to the dining hall to eat food, our water was always brought in bottles. So you would use one bottle for a whole term, for a whole year, and you're using the same bottle. Why? Because these guys, I think, were really looking at how do we improve the lifestyles and reduce waste. So we need as much as possible, ladies and gentlemen, to work around the clock to minimize what we purchase so that we minimize the waste it generates. Let me use another scenario in food. There are many of us who buy food because you have the money, so you prestigiously buy the food, but you know you're not going to consume it. Someone buys tomatoes, reaches home, slices them, puts them in a sauce or whatever it is, and then they realize that the onions were many, or they sliced too much of the onions. And then they throw away the onion. Why? Why would you do that? Onions and tomatoes have no overdose. If you have cut them, please just cook them and you eat. This business of having tomatoes and you chop them and then you leave a balance and then you end up throwing them in the waste bin. One, you are throwing away the food, and every time you're throwing away food, you are throwing away nutrients. And every time you're throwing away nutrients, you must remember that there is someone who is malnourished, meaning that they are lacking the same nutrients. So why do you throw food? Everything that you've purchased as food must be consumed. Because every time you throw it away, you're throwing away the food and the nutrients therein. And every time you're throwing away the nutrients, this is what you're throwing. One, you're throwing away the soil. You're throwing away all the resources that were used to produce that food. They used water, they used the nutrients in the soil, they used the labor, and everything goes to waste. Because someone who produced it used the energy, used the soil, used the water, used maybe a fertilizer. So all of those, when it is not consumed, it means that you are literally throwing it away. So we need to be careful. We need to be very careful on what kind of we need to be careful of what kind of items, what kind of food items we are throwing away. We need to be cognizant that somebody, whenever you throw away something, your neighbor slept hungry, there is a malnourished child who needed those nutrients, and you've thrown them away, or the person who produced that food used a lot of resources. The other time I mentioned that every time you throw away one orange, to produce just one orange, you need 50 liters of water. So every time you throw away one, it means you've thrown away about 2 jerrycans of water. If you have a tomato, just relate it to the amount of water, amount of chemical, amount of time spent to produce it. So food waste is just not, I should say that it is immoral. That is the best word I can use. Food loss and waste are actually attributed to immorality. Every time you are losing food, you are wasting food. That is immorality of the highest order. Because other people need those services. And I think there is one video you need to mute. Yeah, thank you. So that is basically something that we need to talk about when it comes to refusing. And then there is another issue of reusing. There are certain things that need to be reused or recycled. Let me concurrently use the reuse and recycling at a go. You see, for instance, whenever we generate a lot of food waste, if you go to the markets, there is a lot of food that is lost there, and most of the food that is lost in the markets is actually organic. If you look at the organic, rather the Western markets, research has shown that majority of the waste there is actually organic, that it can be reused in other ways. You can reformulate this same waste into, for instance, manure or other things, and then they can be reused. So why aren't we reusing certain things? Because we have not seen value of those things. 2, because we don't have capacity to reuse them. So now the question is, why isn't government or governments investing in reusing waste? It could be a call to action that governments cannot afford to look at waste to kill human beings, and yet the same waste can actually be used in those people's gardens as manure. So there is a lot of policy that needs to come up there. There's a lot of investment that governments can actually put in place to make sure that they secure waste and have a circular economy. That this same waste can be recycled, taken back to the gardens, people use it, produce food, and that food again comes back to our plates. Now, every time we don't manage our waste and every time we don't move towards zero waste, we are actually contributing to climate change issues. Climate change shouldn't be looked at independent of waste. Every time we are generating a lot of unnecessary waste, we are advancing the climatic change impact. So the climate is going to even change to the worst if we don't manage the waste that we are generating here on Earth. So it's very paramount that we need to think about what interventions we need to undertake to minimize waste, to reduce waste, or to recycle waste, so that we actually improve the climate. The more we generate waste, the more we are going to impact on the environment, the more we're going to cause climate issues, etc. So you realize that much of the money is being reinvested in climate change mitigation and adaptation. But I think a lot of money has to go into improving what is causing climate change, ensuring that climate issues are dealt with from the causal perspective. What is causing climate change? If I have already told you that actually waste is one of the causes of climate change, then we need to deal with the waste to make sure that we maintain a good climate for us to survive. Remember, the moment we don't improve climate, the more the weather doesn't get back to normal, we are not looking at the sustainable future. We are looking at the opposite of that. It means that the future will not be sustainable. With climate change, if the weather changes are not dealt with now, it simply means that the future, people who will come after us will not survive, will not have something to deal with. They will not have a future to also look at. And then, of course, there are many things that we need to speak through. And I want to say that one of the other reasons why we generate waste is coming from the next video that I want to share as we are winding up the show. There is Henry, when you see the video, you will let me know that you are seeing it. This is about irresponsibility.
Let's understand.
So if you look at how that consumer or that trader is handling the food, and so the issue of food fraud. So it speaks through the issue of food fraud, how people are fraudulently changing the food. And so by the time this food reaches the consumer is not able to eat it because they realize that it's actually a fraudulent food. And so what happens is that now that food goes to waste, including what was initially food, but because there is fraud happening, someone had milk and the milk now is, the person is putting like 3-4 liters of water in 3 cups of milk. The consumer is going to discard it, and that is food waste. Because what was originally food, because of the fraudulent activity, it goes to waste. So where is it, the resources that were used to produce that food? Remember, a cow has eaten a lot of grass a lot of air, it breathes a lot of oxygen, etc. It goes to waste like that. If you knew the amount of grass that the animal consumes, it has consumed it and will not come back again. And yet that would actually support in elimination of some of the climate issues. So every time you have this food fraud issues, there is always a problem that comes along. So we need to think about zero waste, looking at it from all the angles, Look at it from the perspective of food, clothing, the cars we are driving, where we are washing our cars from, all that. We don't need to have any waste generated. The more we generate waste, the more we hinder our habitats. The more we generate waste, the more we actually pollute the air, the environment in which we stay, the more we contribute to adverse effects of climate change, etc. And once all of those ones are in place, we cannot harness a sustainable future. We cannot even smell the future. We cannot even think about the future. We cannot even think about transformation. So what we just need to do now is to reverse all these negative things, start reducing, start refusing certain things, start reusing, start redesigning certain things, start recycling. And when we do that, then we can now be talking about transformation to the future. So I think that with those so many remarks, we should be able to build a case and support our consumers to transform to more sustainable practices that are going to lead us to a sustainable future. So with those remarks, Henry, I think I will stop at that, and then you could give the closing session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard. That was quite rich. That was healthy. And it was leading us and opening a session of learning and relearning. And we need to do that continuously. We are going to do it more and more and more. Because once we sustain the doing, we are going to get a lot of results. And those results are going to make us a sustainable nation. Our consumption behaviors are going to help nourish the planet A, because we don't have planet B. It is going to help us nourish our life A, because we do not have another life B. The life B we can have is how we go back to life A, which is sustainable, responsible consumption. As we are doing our business, like at consent, our business is to do consumer advocacy, make sure elements of consumer protection are effective and better business. As we are doing that business, we need to think about zero waste, not wasting the resources that we use to drive the agenda. Like it is, let's reduce, let's refuse, let's reject being unsustainable. Let's reuse, redesign, recycle. If your life is unsustainable, recycle it so that you become sustainable. So ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues, and all the consumers, wherever you are, let's continue planning. Let's continue to do. And as we do, let's check, are we a waste? If we say that as we are doing things that we check we are unsustainable, we need to act by reducing, refusing, rejecting to be unsustainable, redesigning, recycling, and reusing whatever we are abusing. We need to continuously analyze our lives. As consumers, though we are in billions, even if we are around about 5 billion who decide adopting zero waste, we can influence the remaining billions to provide a healthy planet. As Bernard has requested, he had something to say. Bernard?
Yes. Sorry, Henry. So there's one practical example that I've gotten, which maybe I need to speak through. It's about water as a resource. Water.
Yes.
Now you realize that there are people. Most of us have in Kampala, wherever people have flush toilets. Now just imagine if somebody is washing clothes outside, and then they want to ease themselves. So usually they run to the toilet and flush, but they have wastewater here which they have been using. So why can't you save the water which is already in the flush, and then you go and use the wastewater to actually clean? You know, those are some bit of small things that we keep wondering about. There are people who wash, for instance, you are washing food. You are washing food, cassava, matoke, fish, and you are cleaning with clean water. And then you have a kitchen garden. So why wouldn't you get this same water and you pour it on the vegetables as part of watering, other than actually throwing it away, and then you go and fetch some bit of other water to actually do the watering? There are people, if we talk about electricity, people switch on lights in the night or whatever it is, and then they leave the lights running. So the question would be, why can't we switch on only the light that we are using maybe for security, and you save the light for other things? All that is part of the consumer issues that we need to talk about when it comes to zero waste or something of the sort. Anything you're not going to use, you need to deal with it. And then lastly, I remembered the fact that while we are busy talking to the consumers and trying to show them what we can be able to do, I also implore our government to actually enforce the available regulations, the available policies, the available laws, etc. Enforce, because we have them. I am not going to request them to actually come up with more. I am actually requesting that we enforce. If somebody is not supposed to construct in a wetland, why are you giving them a license to do so? If somebody is supposed to have a waste bin in their car, why don't the waste bins exist in the cars? Because it is mandatory. We are supposed to have them in the cars, in our vehicles. Why aren't they there? If someone is not supposed to use a particular micron of a Cavera, why do we have them there? So there should be a principle of how to manage the waste from the policy perspective, and people must be arrested. I've never heard of someone being arrested for misusing or dumping waste. We need to enforce the laws so that consumers can learn from the practical experiences we are sharing with them, but also they can take responsibility because of the legal, regulatory, and institutional frameworks that actually exist. So that is what I just wanted to add on our conversation, so that it targets the different categories of individuals who could pick a leaf from it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Now you trigger me to go where I usually, that is governance. So we need zero waste in governance. The duty bearers, we need zero waste. And yes, so if we have the laws and we are not implementing them, that means we are wasting the resources that generated them.
I agree with you. There's a lot of waste.
Coming up with the law, it takes a lot of human time. It takes a lot of budget. It takes a lot of services, electricity. Systematically, people travel, people eat, even the pens, the energy, the lighting, the air conditioning,
the computer,
the local government, the national parliament sitting to legislate, and then it comes into an act, it becomes a regulation, and it is not implemented. That is a waste. So we need zero waste in governance.
Henry, so, you need to read the comment from Bongole that, for instance, UCC has been complaining that we have a lot of counterfeit phones, but we have a regulation on counterfeit. We even have staff who are paid to actually ensure that they regulate and make sure they confiscate and whatever. So where did these phones pass? So there is a lot of waste when it comes to governance, and I think I agree with you that we need to deal with the waste in governance. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we are topping up our hour of discussion, of sharing. So we need to continuously collaborate with regards to nurturing sustainable lifestyles and looking at zero waste in every aspect of humanity. Circularity, we need to make sure we are sustainable citizens. We need sustainable governance. We need sustainable businesses. So, ladies and gentlemen, it was a pleasure having you in the first of our series for April. We are going to roll with you, sail through April, looking at zero waste. As consumers, when we are responsible, we can reduce billions of tons of waste, carbon, time, resources, and we use them effectively. So thank you very much, and we look forward to being with you next Friday. Humanist Media Africa, thank you for this Humanist TV Africa program. Dennis Bongole with all your colleagues, the producers in Nairobi, in Harare, in Freetown, and many other capitals, and our hosts, Paul Kato Mokasa in UK. Thank you very much. And we look forward to our partnership, our advocacy, and sustaining to have healthy consumers. Thank you very much, and God bless.